My name is Rachel Bennett, and for most of my life, I believed my family stopped loving me because I had disappointed them. I was wrong. They stopped loving me because they were afraid I would remember the truth. I found that out on Christmas night, 12 years after my mother told me never to come home again. By then, I was 34, divorced, and raising my 10-year-old son, Noah, in a small rental house outside Cedar Hollow, Vermont. We did not have much. The kitchen window leaked when snow melted too quickly. The furnace made a knocking sound every time it turned on. The second bedroom was so small that Noah's desk had to sit inside his closet. But it was peaceful, and peace had become more valuable to me than comfort. That Christmas, Noah spent nearly a week making gifts for people he barely knew. A painted birdhouse for my father, a knitted scarf for my mother, made with uneven stitches he had learned from a woman at the community center, and a small wooden box for my younger sister Claire. He had burned the word family into the lid with a craft tool I probably should not have let him use. "Do you think Aunt Claire still likes blue?" he asked. "I think so." "Does Grandpa still collect old clocks?" "Yes." "Does Grandma know how to knit?" "She used to." Every question made my chest tighter. Noah had seen my parents only 3 times in his life. Once when he was a baby, once at my grandmother's funeral, and once from across the street during a summer parade when my mother looked directly at us and turned away. Still, children build hope out of very little. A birthday card, a photograph, a family name. The invitation came 6 days before Christmas. It was not addressed to me. It came through Claire. "Mom says you can come for dinner if you want. No apology, no explanation, just that." I read the message at least 20 times. The last time I had entered my parents' house, I had been 22 years old and 6 months pregnant. My mother had packed my clothes into black trash bags. My father stood beside the staircase with his arms folded, while she told me I had brought shame into a respectable family. Claire cried in the hallway but did nothing. No one asked where I would go. No one asked whether the father of my child had hurt me. No one asked why I had stopped sleeping. They only asked whether anyone in town knew. That was the Bennett family. Pain was private. Reputation was sacred. I spent 12 years telling myself I no longer cared. Then Claire sent the invitation, and suddenly I was 22 again, standing in the snow with my belongings in plastic bags. Noah noticed the change in me. "You don't have to go," he said. It embarrassed me that a 10-year-old could see what I was pretending not to feel. "I know. Do you want to?" I looked at the half-finished scarf in his hands. "I don't know." That was the truth. For 3 nights, I changed my mind. Yes, no, maybe, never. Then, on Christmas morning, my mother called. Not Claire. My mother. Her voice sounded older than I remembered. "Dinner is at 6, she said. I waited for more. There was nothing. "Why now?" I asked. A long silence followed. Then she said, "Your father isn't well." "What's wrong with him?" "He has been under pressure." That was not an answer. "Is he sick?" "Rachel, must everything become an interrogation with you?" The familiar irritation in her voice almost made me laugh. 12 years had passed, and she still knew how to make a question sound like a character flaw. "I just want to know why you're inviting us." "Because it is Christmas." "You didn't care about Christmas last year." Another silence. This one felt different. Not anger, fear. "You should come," she said quietly. "Bring Noah." Then she ended the call. At 5:30 that evening, Noah and I drove north toward Cedar Hollow. Snow covered the fields and stone walls. Lights glowed in farmhouse windows. The mountains were black against a pale winter sky. The Bennett family home sat on 40 acres outside town, at the end of a private road lined with sugar maples. My grandfather had bought the land in 1968 and built a maple syrup business from a wooden shed and 6 borrowed buckets. By the time I was born, Bennett Maple Company had become one of the largest independent producers in the region. We sold syrup, candy, gift baskets, and specialty products to luxury stores across New England. My father, Thomas Bennett, liked to call the company his life's work. That was not entirely true. My grandmother created the recipes. My grandfather built the distribution network. My mother designed the packaging. And I spent most of my childhood helping wherever no one else wanted to work. I cleaned bottling equipment, recorded temperatures, entered invoices, drove supply orders after I got my license. By 18, I understood the company better than Claire did. But Claire was charming. She smiled easily. She knew how to make donors, journalists, and local politicians feel important. My father said she had leadership instincts. He said I had an attitude problem. The truth was simpler. Claire obeyed. I asked questions. That difference shaped everything. When Noah and I reached the main road, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "Where are you?" 10 minutes away, I replied. She answered immediately. "Okay, just don't bring up the past tonight." I stared at the message. I had not mentioned the past. I had not spoken to Claire in almost 8 months. But she was already warning me. That was the first sign that the dinner was not about reconciliation. The second sign was the number of cars outside the house. My parents usually kept Christmas small. Immediate family, 2 aunts, maybe a cousin. That night, at least 15 vehicles were parked along the circular driveway. Some belonged to relatives, others did not. I recognized a black Mercedes used by my father's attorney, a dark green SUV with the logo of Northridge Capital, and a county vehicle from the Land Records Office. Noah looked out the window. Are all those people family? Some of them. Who are the others? I don't know. But I had a feeling. Northridge Capital had been buying farms and agricultural businesses throughout northern Vermont. They kept the brand names, replaced local workers, and sold the land behind the operations to developers. My father had publicly criticized them for years. He called them vultures. Apparently, one of the vultures had been invited to Christmas dinner. I parked near the old equipment barn. For a moment, neither of us moved. The house looked exactly as I remembered it. 3 stories, white siding, green shutters, a stone chimney. Warm yellow light behind every window. It looked like safety. That was always its greatest lie. Noah held the gifts against his chest. "Mom? Yes? Are you scared?" I almost denied it. Then I looked at him. A little. He nodded as though that made sense. "I am too." I reached across the console and squeezed his hand. "We can leave any time. Even before dessert? Especially before dessert." That made him smile. We walked through the snow together. Before we reached the porch, the front door opened. Claire stood there in a cream-colored dress, holding a glass of wine. She looked almost exactly like our mother had at 30. Blonde hair pinned back, perfect makeup, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "You came," she said. "You invited me." "I know, I just wasn't sure you would actually show up." She looked at Noah. For 1 second, her expression softened. "Hi, Noah." He held out the wooden box. "I made this for you." Claire took it, but she did not open it. "That's sweet." Then she looked behind us at the driveway. "Did anyone follow you?" I frowned. "What?" "Nothing." "Come inside." The entry hall was crowded. Relatives I had not seen in years turned toward me and then quickly pretended not to stare. My Aunt Judith gave me a stiff hug. My cousin Mark looked at Noah with open curiosity. 2 men in suits stood near the fireplace, speaking quietly with my father's attorney. A woman I recognized from Northridge Capital was studying a framed map of our property. This was not a family dinner. It was a business meeting with Christmas decorations. My mother appeared at the end of the hallway. For a moment, she did not move. Her face looked thinner than I remembered. Her hair, once dark brown, was almost completely gray. I had imagined this meeting many times. In some versions, she cried. In others, she apologized. Sometimes she ran to me. In reality, she looked at Noah first, then at me. "You're late," she said. It was 5:58. "Dinner is at 6. "I know." She nodded toward the coat room. "Leave your things there. No hug, no welcome home, just instructions." Noah held out the scarf. "I made this for you." My mother looked at it for several seconds. Then she took it slowly. "Thank you." He smiled. She did not. But she did not throw it away either. At that point, I was still desperate enough to call that progress. My father entered from the dining room. Thomas Bennett had always been a large man. Broad shoulders, heavy hands, a voice that made employees stop talking when he entered. But that evening, he looked smaller, not weak, compressed, as though something invisible had been pressing down on him for months. His gaze settled on me, then on Noah. "You brought him." My body went cold. You told Mom to invite us. I told her to invite you. The room became quiet around us. Noah looked up at me. I placed one hand on his shoulder. He is my son. My father's jaw tightened. I know who he is. The way he said it made Claire look away. That was the third sign. There was something in the room that everyone understood except me. My mother spoke quickly. Thomas, not here. He stared at me for another second. Then he forced a smile. Dinner is ready. We entered the dining room. The long oak table was covered with candles, silverware, and evergreen branches. At each place setting sat a thick blue folder. The one in front of me had my full legal name printed across the cover. Rachel Ann Bennett, Confidential Family Settlement. I did not sit down. What is this? My father took his seat at the head of the table. A necessary conversation. My mother remained standing behind her chair. Claire looked at the floor. The attorney, Mr. Holloway, opened his folder. My hands began to shake. Why is Northridge here? No one answered immediately. Then the woman near the window stepped forward. My name is Evelyn Price. I represent Northridge Capital. I know who you are, she smiled politely. Then you probably understand that we are in the final stage of acquiring Bennett Maple Company and the associated land holdings. The room seemed to tilt. I looked at my father. You're selling the company. We are restructuring. You're selling it. It is no longer sustainable in its current form. That land was Grandpa's. That land belongs to the family trust. Then why am I hearing about this tonight? My father looked at the folder in front of me. Because your signature is required. There it was. Not forgiveness, not Christmas. A signature. I looked at my mother. She could not meet my eyes. Claire finally spoke. Rachel, please don't make this difficult. I laughed once. It sounded wrong in the quiet room. You threw me out 12 years ago. You ignored my son. And now you invite me to Christmas because you need my signature? My father's expression hardened. This is exactly the behavior I was concerned about. What behavior? Understanding what's happening. You have always confused hostility with intelligence. And you have always confused control with love. My mother whispered my name. Rachel. But I was no longer looking at her. I was looking at the document. The first page contained a summary of the sale. The second contained beneficiary approvals. Beside Claire's name was a signature. Beside my father's name was a signature. Beside my mother's name was a signature. Beside mine was something else. A notation. Prior consent on file. I stopped breathing. What does that mean? Mr. Holloway cleared his throat. Your previous consent to disposition of trust assets has already been documented. Tonight's signature simply confirms I never consented to anything. Silence, not confusion. Silence. My father leaned back in his chair. You signed the family separation agreement when you left. No. I signed a temporary release for medical expenses and housing funds. You signed what was presented to you. I was 22, pregnant, homeless. You told me I had to sign to access my own savings account. His face remained calm. That does not make the agreement invalid. I grabbed the folder and flipped through the pages. At the back was a copy of a document dated 12 years earlier. My signature appeared at the bottom, but the page above it was not the page I remembered. The document stated that I permanently surrendered all future claims to Bennett family property, company ownership, trust distributions, and inheritance rights. My name was signed beneath it. The signature looked real. Because it was real, they had attached my signature to a different document. Noah stood beside me quietly. He was too young to understand the legal language, but he understood fear. Mom? I looked at my father. You changed the pages. He did not answer. My mother closed her eyes. Claire whispered, Dad said you knew. I turned toward her. And you believed him? She said nothing. That was when Noah picked up the folder. A loose photograph slid out and fell to the floor. It landed face up between us. An old photograph. My mother, my father, a hospital room. And a newborn baby in my mother's arms. On the back, written in blue ink, were 4 words. Rachel, December 14th, 1991. But my birthday was December 21st. I stared at the writing, then at my mother. Her face had gone completely white. The room changed. The company sale disappeared. The forged document disappeared. Even my anger disappeared. There was only the photograph and the date. Why does this say I was born a week earlier? My mother gripped the back of her chair. Rachel, not now. My father stood so quickly his chair struck the wall. Put that down. I picked up the photograph. On the far edge of the image, partly hidden behind my father, stood another man. A man I had never seen before. He was looking at the baby, at me, and he was crying. "Who is he?" I asked. No one answered. My father crossed the room and reached for the photograph. I stepped back. "Who is he?" My mother's lips began to tremble. Claire looked terrified. Mr. Holloway closed his folder. The Northridge representatives exchanged a glance. Then my father said the sentence that changed the rest of my life. "That man has nothing to do with this family." I looked at the photograph again. The man's hand rested on my mother's shoulder, not like a stranger, not like a doctor, like someone who belonged there. And suddenly I understood why they had needed my signature, why they had invited me after 12 years, why my father had looked at Noah and said, "You brought him." The sale was not the only secret in that house. It might not even have been the biggest one. I placed the photograph inside my coat. My father moved toward me. "You are not taking that." "Yes, I am." "Rachel," I took Noah's hand. "We're leaving." My mother stepped between me and the door. "Please, sit down." "For what?" Her eyes filled with tears. To hear the whole truth. I stared at her. 12 years earlier, she had watched me leave with my clothes in trash bags. Now she was crying because I had found a photograph. I wanted to stay. I wanted answers. But Noah was shaking beside me, and the room was full of lawyers, strangers, and people who had lied to me my entire life. So I made the first good decision of the night. I walked away. My father shouted after me, "If you leave now, the offer is gone." I stopped in the hallway. "The offer? The settlement? The financial provision for you and the boy?" I turned slowly. "You mean the payment for my signature?" His expression told me I was right. "You have until tomorrow morning," he said. I looked at my mother, then at Claire, then at the photograph beneath my coat. "No," I said. "You have until tomorrow morning." My father frowned. "For what?" "To decide who tells me the truth first." Then Noah and I walked out into the snow. Behind us, the front door remained open. No one followed. Not yet. But before I reached the bottom of the driveway, my phone began to ring. The phone rang before I had even fastened Noah's seatbelt. My mother. I watched her name flash across the screen until the call ended. Then Claire called. Then my father. Then a number I did not recognize. I ignored all of them. The snow was falling harder now, thick enough to blur the lights of the house behind us. I started the car, but my hands were shaking so badly that I had to turn the key twice. Noah sat silently in the passenger seat. He had stopped asking questions. That frightened me more than anything. Children ask questions when they believe adults can answer them. When they stop, it usually means they have decided the truth is too dangerous. I pulled onto the road and drove slowly through the dark. After several minutes, Noah said, "Was that man in the picture your real dad?" The question hit me so hard I nearly missed the turn. "I don't know. But Grandpa said he wasn't family." "I know. Maybe he lied." I glanced at him. His voice was calm, too calm. "Maybe," I said. Noah looked out the window. "People lie when they're scared." I had told him that once after a classmate blamed him for breaking a school tablet. Now he was giving the lesson back to me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Claire. "Please answer. Dad is furious. Mom is falling apart." A second message followed. "You were not supposed to see that photograph." I pulled the car onto the shoulder. Snow hissed beneath the tires. I read the message twice. Not. I don't know what that photograph means. Not. There must be some mistake. You were not supposed to see it. Which meant Claire knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. I typed one question. "Who is the man?" The typing indicator appeared immediately, then disappeared, then returned. Finally, she sent, "I can't tell you over text." I stared at the words. Noah leaned closer. "Is Aunt Claire going to tell you?" "She says she can't." "Why?" "Because adults sometimes think avoiding the truth makes it disappear." "Does it?" "No." He nodded. "I didn't think so." We drove home without speaking again. The moment we entered the house, Noah carried the handmade gifts into his room and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen with my coat still on. The photograph felt heavy inside the pocket. For 12 years, I had believed the worst thing my parents had done was throw me out while I was pregnant. Now I understood that might only have been the moment they realized they could no longer control what I knew. I took the photograph out and placed it under the kitchen light. My mother looked younger than I had ever known her, exhausted, pale, but happy. She held the newborn close to her chest. My father stood on one side of the hospital bed, not touching her. The other man stood closer. His hand rested on her shoulder. He had dark hair, a narrow face, and deep-set eyes. Something about him felt familiar. Not because I remembered him, because parts of his face looked like mine, the shape of the eyebrows, the line of the chin, the slight bend in the nose. I opened the camera on my phone and enlarged the image. On the man's wrist was a watch with a cracked leather strap. On his shirt was a small embroidered logo. The words were blurry, but I could make out the first part. Hollow Creek. I searched the name online. Hollow Creek Orchard, a family-owned apple farm and cider mill 20 miles outside Cedar Hollow. The business had closed years ago after a fire destroyed the main barn. I searched old photographs. Most were low quality, farm festivals, local newspaper clippings, a charity harvest dinner. Then I found a photograph from 1992. 3 men stood beside a truck filled with apple crates. One was my grandfather, one was a younger version of my father, and the third was the man from the hospital photograph. The caption read, "Local producers, Thomas Bennett, Samuel Vale, and George Bennett announce regional distribution partnership." Samuel Vale, I whispered the name aloud. Parade. It meant nothing to me. I searched again. Samuel Vale, Vermont. The first result was an obituary. Samuel James Vale, 1965 to 2003. He had died at 38 in a single-car accident on an icy road. The obituary said he had been the owner of Hollow Creek Orchard, a member of the County Agricultural Board, and a lifelong resident of Cedar Hollow. He had no listed wife, no listed children, but one sentence caught my attention. He is survived by his sister, Laura Vale, and several beloved nieces and nephews. I read the obituary until my vision blurred. Then I clicked an archived newspaper article about the accident. The date was January 4th, 2003. I would have been 11 years old enough to remember someone dying. I remembered nothing, not a funeral, not a whispered conversation, not even the name. My family had not simply kept a secret. They had erased a person. The phone rang again. My mother. This time, I answered. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Where are you?" "Home." "Is Noah with you?" "Yes." "Is he all right?" I almost laughed. "You invited him to a dinner where Dad treated him like a problem." "Your father was upset. He looked at my son like he had seen a ghost." My mother inhaled sharply. "Rachel, please." "Who was Samuel Vale?" Silence. Not surprise. Silence again. My mother had spent years teaching me to fear silence. Now I had learned to use it. I waited. Finally, she whispered, "Where did you hear that name?" "I found him." "You need to listen to me carefully. No, you need to answer. This is not a conversation for the telephone. You had 34 years to choose a better setting." Her breathing changed. "Samuel was a friend of the family. A friend who stood beside you in the hospital when I was born. He was close to us. Was he my father?" The question sounded unreal once spoken aloud. My mother began to cry, not loudly. That made it worse. "I don't know how to answer that without hurting you. You already did." "Rachel, was Samuel Vale my biological father?" "Yes." The word was so quiet I almost missed it. I sat down at the kitchen table. For a moment, I could hear nothing except the furnace knocking inside the wall. Noah's bedroom door opened slightly down the hallway. He was listening. I lowered my voice. "Did Dad know?" "Yes." "How long?" "From the beginning." I closed my eyes. "How?" My mother hesitated. Then the truth began to arrive in pieces. Not cleanly, not honestly, but enough. Before I was born, Bennett Maple Company had nearly collapsed. A failed expansion had left my father and grandfather buried in debt. Hollow Creek Orchard had money, land, equipment, and a distribution agreement that could save both businesses. Samuel Vale and my mother had known each other since high school. When my father began traveling constantly to negotiate loans, my mother and Samuel started spending time together. She called it loneliness. She called it a mistake. She called it something that happened only once. I did not believe that. Neither, apparently, did my father. When my mother became pregnant, she told him the truth. He agreed to raise me as his daughter on one condition. No one would ever know. Samuel would stay away. The Bennett and Vale businesses would continue their partnership, and my mother would never speak to Samuel privately again. What did Samuel want? I asked. He wanted to be part of your life. My throat tightened. And Dad stopped him. They made an arrangement. What arrangement? My mother's voice became smaller. The orchard transferred certain land rights and distribution contracts to the Bennett Company. In exchange for what? She did not answer. In exchange for Samuel staying away from me? It wasn't that simple. It sounds exactly that simple. Your father believed it was the only way to protect the family. Which family? She began crying harder. I felt no sympathy. Not yet. What happened when Samuel died? There was already tension. What tension? He had changed his mind. About me? Yes. According to my mother, Samuel had contacted her shortly before his death. He wanted to tell me the truth. He had kept photographs, letters, documents. He had even created a small trust in my name from the final insurance settlement after the orchard fire. My father found out. They argued. A week later, Samuel died. I stopped breathing. Are you saying Dad killed him? No. The answer came too quickly. I am not saying that. But you're afraid I'll think it. I'm afraid of what you'll do with incomplete information. I stood up. The chair scraped across the floor. Where are the letters? I don't know. Where are the trust papers? I don't know. Who does? Another silence. Then, Laura Vale, Samuel's sister, the woman from the obituary. Does she know about me? Yes. The answer hurt in a different way. A stranger had known who I was. Maybe my whole life. Why didn't she contact me? Your father threatened legal action. He said Samuel had no recognized claim and that any contact would be considered harassment. Was the trust real? I never saw the final paperwork. But Dad did. Yes. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. The company sale, the forged separation document, the sudden invitation. It was all connected. If Samuel created a trust for me, what happened to it? I don't know. You keep saying that. Because there are things your father handled without me. You signed the sale papers. I signed what he told me to sign. The excuse was so familiar that it no longer sounded human. I did that once too, I said. When you threw me out. She went quiet. I looked toward Noah's room. He was still standing in the doorway. I turned away so he would not see my face. Why did you invite me tonight? My mother sniffed. Northridge discovered an old title restriction tied to Hollow Creek Orchard. There it was, the real reason. What restriction? Part of the Bennett production land was once owned by Samuel's family. The transfer agreement included a reversion clause. I understood enough from my work to know what that meant. If the company sells, the land reverts? Not exactly. To whom? To Samuel's legal descendant. The room went still. Me. My mother continued quickly. Your father believes the old separation agreement eliminates your claim. The fake agreement. He says it is valid. It isn't. Northridge's attorneys are not convinced either. That is why they wanted you there. To sign away Samuel's land. Yes, I sat down again. My father had spent 12 years calling me unstable, unwanted, unworthy. But the entire time, the company he guarded so fiercely depended on something that might legally belong to me. Not through Thomas Bennett, through Samuel Vale, the man they erased. My mother whispered, Your father is desperate. Good. Rachel, this sale is the only thing keeping the company alive. Then maybe he should have told the truth before using me as a signature. Hundreds of people depend on that business. So you decided I should be sacrificed again? No. That is exactly what you decided. I ended the call. My hands were cold. I opened my laptop and searched for Laura Vale. There were several people with that name. Then I found a local historical society page. A woman in her early 60s stood beside a restored cider press. The caption identified her as Dr. Laura Vale, volunteer archivist and retired veterinarian. An email address appeared beneath the photograph. I wrote one sentence. My name is Rachel Bennett. I believe Samuel Vale was my biological father. I stared at the screen. Then added, I found the hospital photograph. I sent the email at 9:14 p.m. At 9:17, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered. A woman said, Rachel? Her voice broke on my name. Yes. This is Laura Vale. I could hear her breathing. Then she said something no one in my family had ever said to me. I have been waiting 23 years for you to call. My eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you find me? I tried. What happened? Your father made sure every letter came back. I closed my eyes. Laura continued. Samuel wrote to you every birthday until he died. My grip tightened around the phone. Do you still have them? Yes. All of them. Yes. The tears came then. Not graceful tears, not the quiet kind. I covered my mouth so Noah would not hear. Laura waited. When I could speak again, I asked, was there a trust? Yes. What happened to it? A long pause. Your father moved the money. My body went numb. How much? At the time Samuel died. Just over $600,000. I could not speak. Laura continued. With investment growth, it should be worth several million now. The kitchen seemed to tilt. And the land? Samuel placed the Hollow Creek acreage into the same trust. Why? Because he wanted you to have something no one could take away. I almost laughed at the cruelty of it. Someone had tried to protect me, and my family had built their life on stealing that protection. Laura, I said, do you have proof? Yes. Where? In a safe deposit box. Can I see it? You can see everything. When? Tomorrow morning. I looked at the clock. Christmas night. Snowstorm. A family sale, waiting for my signature. My father had given me until morning. He had no idea I had just found the one person he had spent decades keeping away from me. Where do I meet you? Laura gave me an address in Cedar Hollow. Before she ended the call, she said, Rachel, there is something else. My stomach tightened. What? Samuel did not believe his accident was an accident. The room became very quiet. What do you mean? He left me a sealed letter 3 days before he died. What does it say? I don't know. You never opened it? It was addressed to you. I looked toward Noah. He had stepped fully into the hallway now. His face was pale. Laura's voice lowered. Your father knows that letter exists. A knock struck the front door. 3 hard blows. Noah jumped. I looked through the kitchen window. My father stood on the porch. He was alone. Snow covered his shoulders. One hand was inside his coat pocket. The other held a blue folder. Laura was still speaking. Rachel, do not sign anything he brings you. My father knocked again. Then he looked directly through the window and raised the folder so I could see it. Across the front were the words, Final Family Settlement. I ended the call. Noah whispered, Are you going to let him in? I stared at the man who had raised me, the man who had erased my biological father, the man who may have stolen millions from a trust created in my name. Then I looked at my son. No, I said, but my father did not leave. He reached into his pocket. For one terrifying second, I thought he had a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a small brass key. He held it against the glass and mouthed 3 words. I found the box. My father remained outside for almost a minute, holding the brass key against the glass. Snow gathered in his hair and melted along the collar of his coat. He looked less like the man who had controlled every room of my childhood and more like someone who had finally realized the walls were closing in. Noah stood beside me in the hallway. Is that the key to the box? He asked. I think so. Should we call the police? The question embarrassed me because I had not thought of it. I had spent my whole life treating my father's anger as something private, a family weather system, something we were expected to endure without involving outsiders. I picked up my phone. My father saw me do it. His expression changed. He lowered the key and knocked again, this time more softly. Rachel, he called through the door. I came alone. That doesn't make you safe. His face tightened. Open the door. We need to talk before you make a mistake. I almost laughed. Even then, he spoke as if the danger came from me. I called Laura instead of the police. She answered immediately. He's here, I said. Thomas? Yes, he has a brass key. He says he found the box. Laura went silent. What kind of box? He didn't say. Do not let him inside. I wasn't planning to. If he has the key, I think he has, then Samuel's safe deposit box may already be compromised. My father knocked again. Rachel, I know you're speaking to her. The words passed through the door like cold air. Laura heard him. Put me on speaker, she said. I did. Her voice filled the entryway. Thomas, step away from the door. My father froze. For the first time since arriving, he looked afraid. Laura. You were warned never to contact her without counsel. You don't get to tell me what I can do with my daughter. Laura's reply came calmly. She is not a possession. My father looked through the glass at me. That woman has spent 30 years trying to destroy this family, Laura said. No, Thomas. I spent 30 years waiting for the truth to outlive you. Noah looked at me. I did not know whether to shield him from the conversation or let him hear what honesty sounded like. My father raised the blue folder. This contains an agreement that protects Rachel, protects the boy, and protects the company. From what? I asked. From a legal fight you cannot afford. You mean a legal fight you cannot afford? He stared at me. Laura said. What is the key for? My father did not answer. Thomas, she continued, if you access Samuel's box, you have committed another crime. I found the key in Margaret's things, my mother's things. The phrase felt wrong. What do you mean her things? I asked. He looked away for half a second. That was enough. Where is Mom? At home. Then why are you going through her belongings? She has been unwell. Unwell how? He hesitated. My father only hesitated when the truth was dangerous. She had an episode after you left. What kind of episode? She fainted. Is she in the hospital? No. Did a doctor see her? This is not relevant. It became relevant when you showed up at my house after midnight with a key from her belongings. He pressed his lips together, then he lowered his voice. Your mother has been hiding things from me. Laura gave a short, humorless laugh. That must be difficult for you. My father ignored her. The box is not Samuel's, he said. It belonged to your grandmother. My grandmother? Yes. I thought of Evelyn Bennett, my father's mother, a severe woman with silver hair who smelled of peppermint and furniture polish. She died when I was 20. She had been the only person in my family who ever defended my questions, not my choices. Not me, but my right to ask. Once, when I was 15, my father told me to stop examining company invoices because bookkeeping was not a child's concern. My grandmother waited until he left the room, slid the ledger back toward me, and said, Never trust a man who is frightened by a woman reading numbers. At the time, I thought it was a joke. Now it sounded like a warning. What was in her box? I asked. I don't know. Then why are you here? Because the key was stored with a note bearing your name. The hallway seemed to narrow. What note? He reached into the folder and pressed a sheet of paper against the glass. The writing was faint, but I recognized my grandmother's sharp handwriting. For Rachel, when Thomas can no longer stop her. I felt Noah's fingers close around mine. Laura whispered, Oh my God, my father said. Open the door. No. You need to see what I found. Slide it under the door. His jaw tightened. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. For several seconds, he stood motionless. Then he crouched and pushed the paper beneath the door. I waited until he stepped back before picking it up. The note was real. I knew that handwriting. Below the first sentence, my grandmother had written, The truth is stored where Bennett blood was first bought. A number followed. Box 317. Cedar Hollow Savings Bank. Laura spoke first. That isn't Samuel's box. No, I said. It's something else. My father raised the brass key. This opens it. How do you know? The bank tag was attached. Then give me the key. His expression hardened again. The box is registered to the Bennett Family Foundation. I am the surviving trustee. Then why was the key hidden with a note addressed to me? He said nothing. Laura answered for him. Because Evelyn knew he would never open it unless he became desperate. My father's face changed. Not much, but enough to confirm it. He had not come to warn me. He had come because he had already tried to access the box and failed. Did the bank refuse you? I asked. He looked at me through the glass. The box requires 2 authorized parties. Who is the second? He stared at me. I already knew. Me. He nodded once. The pieces began fitting together. My grandmother had arranged the box so my father could not access it alone, but neither could I. Not until both of us appeared. A deadlock designed to survive her. What's inside? I asked. I told you, I don't know. You know enough to be afraid. I am afraid of what Laura will make you believe. Laura's voice sharpened. No one needs help believing bank records. My father stepped closer to the door. Rachel, listen to me. Your grandmother hated conflict. She collected documents without understanding context. Whatever is in that box may be incomplete. That sounds familiar. It may damage innocent people. Who? He did not answer. Mom? Still nothing. Claire? His eyes shifted. That was all I needed. Claire is involved. No. You looked away. You are seeing patterns because Laura wants you angry. Claire knew about Samuel. She knew the photograph existed. She knew tonight was about my signature. She knows what we told her. Which is? That Samuel was unstable, that he manipulated your mother, that he tried to use you to take the company. Laura cut in. That is a lie. My father raised his voice. You were not there for every conversation. I was there when Samuel came home with bruises after meeting you at the mill. The air changed. I looked at the phone. What? Laura went quiet. My father's eyes became hard. Do not start this. When did that happen? I asked. 3 days before he died, Laura said. My father struck the glass with the flat of his hand. Noah flinched. I pulled him behind me. Leave, I said. My father's anger vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He lowered his hand. Rachel, I did not kill Samuel. I didn't ask if you did. His face went pale. Laura did not speak. Neither did I. My father had answered a question no one had asked. He stepped away from the door. The roads will close soon, he said. We should go to the bank at 9. You think I'm walking into a bank with you alone? Bring Laura, Laura said. I will be there. My father looked toward the phone again. This does not concern you. It concerned my brother. He signed away his interest. No. You forged his transfer after he died. The accusation landed like a dropped plate. I looked from the phone to my father. He did not deny it. Not immediately. That was enough. What transfer? I asked. Laura inhaled slowly. Hollow Creek Orchard held a 28% interest in Bennett Maples Distribution Division. After Samuel died, Thomas filed a transfer claiming Samuel had assigned his shares to the Bennett Foundation. Did he? No. My father said. Samuel owed the company. Laura continued as if he had not spoken. The signature on the transfer was dated 2 days after Samuel's death. Noah squeezed my hand. My body went cold. 2 days after? Yes. My father's voice became controlled. The filing date and signature date were entered incorrectly. Laura laughed. For 23 years. My father turned away from the door. For a moment, I thought he might leave. Then he stopped near the porch steps. If you open that box, he said without looking at me, you may destroy what remains of this family. I stared at his back. You did that before I was old enough to understand the word family. He stood there another second. Then he placed the brass key on the porch rail. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. He walked to his car and drove away. I waited until his taillights disappeared before opening the door. The wind pushed snow into the entryway. I picked up the key. It was old, heavier than I expected, with the number 317 stamped into the metal. Noah stood behind me. Are we going to the bank? Yes. Is Grandpa going too? Yes. He thought about that. Can I stay with Mrs. Hill? Mrs. Hill lived next door and watched Noah after school. He had never asked to stay away from me during something important. I turned toward him. You don't want to come? He shook his head. I don't like how Grandpa looks at us. I knelt in front of him. You don't have to come. Will you be safe? I'll bring Laura. You don't know her. No. What if she's lying too? The question stopped me. He was right. Laura had said the words I wanted to hear. She had called Samuel my father. She had promised letters, records, and proof. But I had known her for less than an hour. My parents had taught me one useful lesson, though not intentionally. The person who tells you what you hope is true can still be using you. I'll be careful, I said. Noah nodded, but he did not look convinced. Neither was I. After he went back to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. The blue note from my grandmother lay beside the brass key. I searched public records until nearly 3 a.m. The Bennett Family Foundation appeared in dozens of filings: scholarships, land donations, agricultural grants, local sponsorships. My father's name appeared as president, my mother as secretary, Claire as development director. Then I found an annual financial report from 6 years earlier. The foundation had received a large transfer from an entity called Betrayal Rural Holdings. Amount: $1.84 million. Purpose: conservation acquisition. There was no matching conservation property listed among the foundation's assets. I searched the land records. Betrayal Rural Holdings had once owned 112 acres beside Hollow Creek Orchard. That property was now part of the main Bennett Sugar Forest, the same forest Northridge wanted most. My biological father's land had not merely helped save the company. It had become the most valuable piece of it, and somehow the Bennett Foundation had acquired it without paying for it. At 3:26 a.m., an email arrived from Claire. The subject line read, "You need to know before tomorrow." The message contained no text, only an attachment, an audio file. I put on headphones and pressed play. At first there was only static. Then my grandmother's voice, older, weak, but unmistakable. "If Rachel ever hears this, Thomas has lost control." I sat completely still. My grandmother continued, "Samuel Vale did not die because of the weather." The recording clicked. A second voice entered. My mother. She sounded younger, terrified. "Evelyn, please stop recording." My grandmother said, "Then tell the truth." My mother began to cry. I saw Thomas follow him. The audio ended. I stared at the screen. A message from Claire appeared beneath the attachment. "I found this in Mom's desk 2 years ago. Dad does not know I copied it." Then another message. "There is more in the bank box." And another. "Rachel, please do not trust Laura completely." My heart began to pound. I typed, "Why?" Claire answered after almost a minute. "Because Samuel was not the only person who put money in your trust. Someone else did too." "Who?" The typing indicator appeared, then vanished, appeared again. Finally, Claire sent, "Mom." I stared at the word. Before I could respond, another email arrived from an unknown encrypted address. The message contained one line: "Do not go to box 317 with Thomas Bennett." Attached was a photograph taken inside Cedar Hollow Savings Bank. My father stood at the counter speaking to the branch manager. The date stamped in the corner was from the previous afternoon, Christmas Eve. He had already been at the bank before dinner. He had already tried to open the box. Below the photograph was a second line. "He was not refused because he needed you. He was refused because box 317 has been under criminal hold since 2003. I read the sentence 3 times. Then the phone rang. "Laura," I answered. "Did you send me an email?" I asked. "No." "Did you know the box was under criminal hold?" Silence. My grip tightened. "Laura?" "I knew there had been an inquiry." "What inquiry?" "After Samuel died, a state investigator began looking into the land transfers." "What happened?" "The investigation was closed." "Why?" Laura's voice changed. For the first time, she sounded uncertain. "Because the investigator disappeared." I stood up so quickly the table shook. "What do you mean disappeared?" "He never returned home after meeting your father." The furnace clicked off. The house became silent. Laura continued, "Rachel, the key your father gave you may not open evidence." "What does it open?" "A confession." I looked at the brass key lying beneath the kitchen light, then at my grandmother's note, "The truth is stored where Bennett blood was first bought." For the first time, I understood she might not have been speaking metaphorically. At 7:05 the next morning, before sunrise, someone tried to break into my house. The first crash came from the back porch. Not loud, careful, like someone testing whether a window had been locked. I motioned for Noah to stay where he was. He nodded without speaking and quietly stepped into the laundry room, exactly as we had practiced during storm drills. I turned off every light in the house. Outside, dawn had not yet broken. The snow reflected enough moonlight for me to see movement behind the detached garage. One shadow, then another. My phone was already in my hand. I dialed 911. While the dispatcher answered, whoever was outside tried the back door. Once, twice, then stopped. "They're trying to get inside," I whispered. The dispatcher told me officers were already on their way. Already? That caught my attention. "Has someone else called?" There was a brief pause. "Ma'am, we received a report about suspicious activity in your area about 10 minutes ago." "From who?" "I'm sorry, I don't have that information." The line stayed open. 5 minutes later, red and blue lights flooded the snow. By the time the deputies searched the property, whoever had been outside was gone. They found only one thing: fresh footprints leading toward the woods, and a black leather glove. Inside the glove was a folded piece of paper. One sentence: "Don't open the box." No signature, no fingerprints, nothing else. At 8:30 that morning, Mrs. Hill arrived to stay with Noah. He hugged me tighter than usual. "Please don't let Grandpa yell at you." "I won't. And don't sign anything," I smiled. "I promise." He reached into his pocket. "I want you to take this." It was the little wooden compass I had given him on his 8th birthday. "You always said people get lost when they stop trusting themselves." I closed my hand around it. "I remember." Laura was already waiting outside Cedar Hollow Savings Bank when I arrived. She looked nothing like I had imagined. No expensive lawyer, no dramatic entrance. Just a woman in her 60s, wearing a heavy brown coat and holding a weathered leather satchel. The moment she saw me, she smiled sadly. "You have Samuel's eyes." No one had ever said that before, not once in 34 years. I didn't know how to respond. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. "Did he really write to me every birthday?" Laura nodded. "Every single one." My father's black SUV pulled into the parking lot exactly 2 minutes later. He stepped out alone. No attorney, no Claire, no Northridge representatives. Only him. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then he looked directly at Laura. "You shouldn't be here," she answered calmly. "I've been waiting 23 years for this meeting." Inside the bank, the manager escorted us into a private records room. Before anyone sat down, he placed a thick folder on the table. "Mr. Bennett," he said carefully, "before we proceed, I need to inform everyone that the criminal preservation order placed on box 317 expired 6 months ago after the final administrative review." I looked at Laura. She frowned. "So the anonymous email was lying." "Or partially lying," she replied quietly. My father said nothing. The manager continued. "According to our records, access requires both registered key holders." He looked at me. "Rachel Bennett," then at my father. "Thomas Bennett." "So neither of us could enter alone," I said. "Correct." My father finally spoke. "Can we get this over with?" The manager unlocked the outer mechanism. I inserted the brass key my father had left on my porch. It turned smoothly. The heavy metal drawer slid forward. Inside were only 4 items: a sealed envelope, a leather journal, a small cassette tape, and an old property deed wrapped in blue cloth. Nothing else. No stacks of cash, no jewelry, no dramatic fortune, just paper. My father visibly relaxed. Too quickly. He had expected something worse. Laura noticed it too. "Interesting," she murmured. "What?" He already knew what wasn't inside. The envelope carried only 3 handwritten words. "For Rachel alone." My father immediately reached toward it. Laura stopped him. "It isn't addressed to you. It concerns my family." Laura looked him straight in the eyes. "No, Thomas. It concerns hers." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter, my grandmother's writing. "Rachel, if you are reading this, then the day I feared has finally arrived. You will soon discover that Thomas lied about Samuel. But there is another lie you must understand before you judge anyone. Your mother tried to leave, twice. She packed your clothes. She packed her own. Both times Thomas found her before sunrise. She stayed because she believed leaving would destroy you. Whether she was right or wrong is for you to decide. Do not confuse weakness with cruelty. They are not the same." My eyes blurred. Everything I had believed about my mother shifted. Not erased, complicated. I turned the page. The final paragraph read, "The evidence Thomas fears is not in this box. It never was. He has spent decades protecting the wrong secret." My father stood abruptly. "What else does it say?" I folded the letter. "It says enough." "No." His voice cracked. "What else?" I looked at him for a long moment. Then I realized something. He wasn't afraid of what was inside the box anymore. He was afraid of whatever wasn't. Laura reached for the leather journal. The first page bore Samuel Vale's signature. Below it was a title, "Everything They Couldn't Make Me Forget." Laura slowly looked up at me. "I think," she swallowed, "this changes everything." Before either of us opened the journal, the bank manager returned. "Excuse me," he said nervously. "Mrs. Bennett." "Yes?" "There's someone asking for you." "Who?" He hesitated. "A woman." He glanced toward my father. "She insists Mr. Bennett must not see her." Laura frowned. "What's her name?" The manager took a slow breath. "She says her name is—" He looked down at the note in his hand. "Emily Carter." Neither Laura nor I recognized the name, but my father's face drained of color. For the first time in my life, I watched Thomas Bennett genuinely panic. He whispered only 2 words, "Not her." My father had always believed fear looked the same on everyone. Raised voices, shaking hands, desperate bargaining. But as he stared toward the lobby, I saw something I had never witnessed before. His own fear. Emily Carter walked into the records room carrying a worn leather briefcase and a thick envelope sealed with red wax. She looked to be in her late 50s. Confident, calm, the kind of woman who had spent years telling difficult truths without raising her voice. She ignored my father completely. Instead, she walked straight toward me. "You must be Rachel," I nodded. "I'm sorry we had to meet like this." "Do I know you?" "No." She placed the envelope gently on the table. "But your biological father trusted me with something 23 years ago." Laura stared at her. "Emily, you remember me?" "We met once, at Samuel's funeral." Emily nodded. "I was his attorney." My father closed his eyes. For just a second. It was enough. He knew exactly why she had come. Emily opened the briefcase and removed another folder. Samuel believed he might not live long enough to tell Rachel the truth himself. After several threats, he instructed me to hold these documents until one of 2 things happened. She looked at me. "Either you turned 35, or Bennett Maple Company was offered for sale." I felt the room go completely still. "He expected this," I whispered. "He expected your father would eventually choose money over secrecy." Emily slid the documents across the table. Inside were copies of letters, trust agreements, land records, photographs, and one notarized affidavit signed by Samuel only 3 days before his death. My father spoke for the first time. "Those papers prove nothing." Emily looked at him. "They prove enough." She opened the affidavit. Samuel's handwriting covered 4 pages. He described every meeting, every threat, every demand that he disappear from my life, every payment tied to the transfer of Hollow Creek land, and finally, one sentence that seemed to stop time itself. "If anything happens to me before Rachel learns who I am, this statement should be given to law enforcement." I slowly lowered the papers. "You thought he was going to die," Emily answered quietly. "He believed someone wanted him silent." My father slammed his hand onto the table. "This is absurd." Laura finally opened Samuel's journal. Inside were copies of birthday letters. Every year, every birthday, from my 1st to my 12th, the year he died. "Rachel, today you turn 8. I saw you at the school concert. You smiled exactly like your mother. I wanted to tell you I was proud of you. Instead, I stood outside in the snow. Maybe one day you'll know why. Love, Dad." I could not breathe. Another letter, age 9. Another, age 10. Another, age 11. Each one ended the same way. "Love, Dad." No one had ever called me that with such tenderness. Not once. Tears blurred every page. Laura reached into the back cover. "There's something else." A small envelope had been hidden inside the journal. It contained a single Polaroid photograph. Samuel holding me as a baby. My mother standing beside him, both smiling. On the back were 6 words, "The happiest day of my life." I looked toward my father. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the floor. Emily broke the silence. There is one final document. She unfolded the property deed wrapped in blue cloth. This deed never transferred ownership to Bennett Maple Company. My father looked up sharply. It transferred the land, she paused, into a protected trust for Rachel Bennett upon Samuel Vale's death. The bank manager leaned forward. I've never seen anything like this, Emily continued. The transfer your father filed 23 years ago was never legally completed because the original deed remained here. Laura looked at me. Which means... Emily finished the sentence. The land never belonged to Bennett Maple. My father stood. No. His voice cracked. No. He looked at me with desperation instead of authority. If that deed stands... It does, Emily interrupted. Then Northridge cannot purchase the property from you. And neither can the bank. And neither can the foundation. Everything stopped. The sale, the financing, the entire redevelopment. My father had built his future on land that legally wasn't his. He whispered. I spent 23 years protecting this company, Laura answered softly. No. You spent 23 years protecting your lie. 3 weeks later, the truth became public. Not because I wanted revenge, because the documents required it. The state attorney opened a civil investigation into the historical land transfers. Northridge immediately withdrew from negotiations. The forged separation agreement was declared unenforceable. The Bennett Family Foundation lost control of the Hollow Creek acreage. A court appointed an independent trustee to administer Samuel's trust until every disputed asset had been reviewed. Noah asked me one afternoon, "Does that mean we're rich now?" I smiled. "No. What are we then?" "Free." That answer seemed to satisfy him. My mother left my father 4 months later, not dramatically, no shouting, no headlines. She packed 2 suitcases, rented a small cottage near the lake, and finally admitted something she had hidden for decades. I thought surviving was the same as protecting you. She looked at Noah. I was wrong. Forgiveness did not happen that day. It happened slowly, over quiet breakfasts, birthday cards, long conversations. Trust rebuilt itself one honest moment at a time. Claire resigned from the family company before the court required it. She apologized, not because she feared consequences, because she finally admitted she had spent her entire life choosing comfort over courage. I accepted her apology. I did not erase the past. Those are different things. My father was the last person I saw. Almost a year after Christmas, he asked to meet me. We sat on a bench overlooking the maple forest. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. He held no documents, no contracts, no demands. I thought I was saving the family, he said. You were saving yourself, he nodded. Probably. After a long silence, he asked, Will you ever forgive me? I looked across the trees Samuel had once walked. I already did. Hope crossed his face. Then I continued. But forgiveness doesn't restore trust. You have to live with what you chose. He lowered his head. For the first time in my life, he had nothing left to argue with. That autumn, Laura gave Noah Samuel's old pocket watch, the same watch he had worn in the hospital photograph. Noah turned it over in his hands. Do you think Grandpa Samuel would have liked me? Laura laughed through tears. He already did. He just never had the chance to tell you. Noah wound the watch carefully. The quiet ticking filled the room, a sound that had waited decades to be heard. People often ask whether discovering the truth changed my life. It did. But not because of the land, not because of the money, not even because I finally learned who my biological father was. It changed my life because I stopped confusing silence with peace. Families do not become stronger by hiding the truth. They become prisoners of it. For years, I believed I had been abandoned because I wasn't enough. In reality, I had been pushed away because I was the one person capable of exposing what everyone else was trying to bury. The greatest inheritance Samuel left me was never the property. It was proof that someone had loved me enough to keep telling the truth, even when he knew he might never hear me call him Dad. And every Christmas now, Noah hangs a small wooden ornament on our tree. It reads, Family is not built by blood alone. It is built by the people who choose the truth, even when it costs them everything. When I look at it, I don't think about what I lost. I think about what finally became impossible to steal.